Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Zafar, and in this video we're going to talk about conditionals in JavaScript. So we use conditionals or if statements pretty much every single day in our lives, even if we don't realize it. Like for example, when you tell, when you say, if it's sunny outside, I'll wear my t-shirt and shorts, right? But if it's raining outside, I'll get my umbrella. Right, so all these are form of conditional statements. Or for example, if you say if it's cold outside, I'll get my jacket, right? So that's an if statement, that's a conditional statement. So in this video, we're going to talk about conditional statements in JavaScript. I'm going to go ahead and click on new snippet. So I'm in the sources tab in the snippets sub-tab right here, and I'll create a new snippet called conditionals. And I'm going to use the curly brackets trick that we talked about in the previous video to not get variables already declared errors. So I'm going to use the if reserved JavaScript keyword to start my if statement, and I use these two parentheses, which you always use that in if statement, so you always need the parentheses. So inside here, I need to put something, right, some expression that evaluates to a Boolean, right? So a Boolean in JavaScript is just true or false, right? Yes or no. There's no other value that it can take. So it's just yes or no, true or false. So here I can say, for example, if 3 is less than 4, right, then console.log this line runs, right? So an if statement comes in the form of if, right, the reserved keyword, and then we use parentheses and we put something in between those parentheses that resolves to a Boolean. So in this case, if this is true, this line will run. But if it's not true, this line will be completely skipped or ignored by the runtime. So let's do Control Enter, and notice we get this line runs, right? But if I do, if 5 is less than 3, notice we don't get this line runs. So this is completely skipped. One important thing to mention about if statements like this, if you only have one line, it's fine to leave it like this. You can have one line. But if you're going to write multiple lines, like let me demonstrate. I'm just going to copy this exact same line here. And let me clean the console and run. Notice that we got one of the two console.logs. And the reason for this is that if you need multiple lines in an if statement, you must include, you must put them inside curly brackets like this. So now if this resolves to true, everything in between those curly brackets will run. But if this is false, nothing runs here, right? So the whole block will be completely skipped or ignored by the runtime. So I like to always use the curly brackets because sometimes in the future you might come back to your code and add, a line or two more. You might not notice the fact that you don't have curly brackets, so things will not work properly. One thing to mention, remember how we talked about the plus or the minus or the multiplication or the division? We called those arithmetic operators, right? We called those arithmetic operators. This right here, right, this less than sign, is actually a comparison operator, right? So a comparison operator, in this case, we have two sides, and a comparison operator returns a Boolean, right, whether that comparison is true or false. So in this case, 5 is not less than 4, so this will return to false. So we also have greater than, so in this case, this will be true. So we get two console.logs. We also have greater than or equal to, and we write it like this. We also have less than or equal to, and we write it like this. And we have equality, which we use 3 equal signs. So this checks if 5 equal to 4. In this case, that's false, so we shouldn't see anything, right? And if we want not equal to, it's like this, right? And if I run this, so not equal, so 5 is not equal to 4, that's true, and this block will run. So now let's see how we use variables, right, with Booleans. So I'm going to delete this right here. So we're going to say, for example, suppose we're writing a program for some employer, and let's say they have some criteria about hiring a person, right? So we want to write a program for that. So I'm going to create a variable with let, and I'm going to call it is over 18 equal false. So this program will basically determine if somebody can apply for that company or not. So one of the criteria might be that they have to be over 18, let's say. And I'm going to create another one. Let has degree equal to false. And I'm going to do let has experience equal false. So first of all, you must be over 18 to be considered at the company, right? So that we can use an if statement to check if you're over 18 or not. And then suppose that the company requires you to either have a degree or have experience to be considered for the job, right? But either way, you must be over 18, if that makes sense. Notice really quickly that those booleans, right, the false here is not surrounded by quotes, and that's very important. So if I do this, so this is definitely not the same as this one right here, because this is the string literal that just happens to contain the word false, right? But this is the actual boolean value false, right? So those are two very different things. So when you use false and true, you never want to surround them with quotes. So it's like this. All right, so let's give it a shot. So I'm going to say if is over 18 and, right, we're going to talk about this in a second, has degree. And notice I put the curly brackets, and I'll do console.log you can apply. So let's talk about this for a little bit. So remember how we said the plus or minus, these are arithmetic operators, and we talked about the less than, the greater than, those are comparison operators. We also have a different kind or another kind of operators in JavaScript, and it's these ones. So this is the AND operator, and it's a logical operator. Okay, so a logical operator takes in two sides in this case, right? Because it's a binary logical operator, so it takes two sides, and it returns true only if, right? Only if both sides are true. Okay, so if you're over 18 and you have a degree, both must be true for this block of code to execute. Otherwise, it's not going to execute. So let's see. If I clear the console, I'm going to do a Control Enter. Notice that we don't see anything because in this case, both are false. But let's say you are over 18, but you don't have a degree. And I'm going to do Control Enter. And we still don't see this console.log because this is true, but this is false, right? So if I changed both to true, now we see that you can apply, right? So remember that we said that this employer, you can apply if, so first of all, you must be over 18, but you either have to have a degree or experience. So let's write another if statement. So I can say if is over 18 and has experience, console.log you can apply. So I'm going to clear the console. So if I run this, we get one you can apply. But notice what happens if I put true right here. So what do you think will happen? So if pause this video and think about it, what do you think will happen? So if I run this, and notice we get two console.logs, and this is probably not the intended behavior because we know, obviously one of them has to be true for you to apply, but if all of them are true, we want to see only one console.log, if that makes sense. So there's a couple of ways to solve this. We can use the else if, right? We can say else if, or actually let's put it on the second line to be clear. So if this is true, this block will run, right? So if you're over 18 and you have a degree, right, this block runs. If this is false, then the code will check the other condition, right? Else if, right, if this is true, then this will run. So these two blocks will not run, right? These two blocks will not run at the same time. It's either the first one or the second one, right? So I can run this. Let me clear the console. Now it says you can apply, and notice that we only got one console.log because notice the first one passes, right? So if this is true, this runs and that's it, right? We don't run the second block. But suppose in this case, if all of them are back to false, and I'm going to clear the console and run again. So we get nothing, right? It would be nice if we can get at least some output that says, like you cannot apply, or, wait a few more years or something. So I can use an else, right? And I can do console.log you cannot apply at this time. So let's talk a little bit about this. So first of all, the first check runs, right? If you're over 18 and you have a degree, then you can apply, and that's it. Nothing runs after this. So this whole, 2 blocks right here, all this will be skipped. If this is false, right, JavaScript will check the other condition, right? Else if this is true, then this block runs. All else fails, right, then this else runs. So this is a little bit redundant. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to improve it. So one way to improve it is we can combine those 2 statements, right, or those 2 checks in one check, right? So we can say is over 18 and has degree, right, or has experience, right? So let's talk about how this works. So first of all, notice that I added parentheses right here around this has degree or. So this is the or operator, right? Remember how we said the and is a logical operator. The or is also a logical operator that takes, in this case, 2 booleans, right? Has degree and has experience, and it returns true if at least one of them is true, right? So if you have a degree or you have an experience or both, right, it will return true. But if both of them are false, then it will return false. I hope that makes sense. So in this case, the reason why I used parentheses is because the order of these Boolean expressions really makes a huge difference, and it really matters. And there's a lot of rules that you can read on the order of which JavaScript checks these Booleans. But in this case, the and, right, have a higher precedence than the or. So if I don't have the parentheses, it's going to say if you're over 18 and you have a degree or you have an experience, right? Does that make sense? If not, definitely I would encourage you to read more about the logical operator precedence in JavaScript. So I don't need this anymore. So let's see if this works. So now I have everything set to false. So I can do Control Enter, and it says you cannot apply at this time, right? Because everything is false. But suppose I'm over 18 and I have a degree, but I don't have an experience. So I'm gonna do clear, Control Enter, and notice it says you can apply. So this check right here passed, right? So it's gonna run this block of code inside of those curly brackets, and it's gonna skip the else. So now if I don't have a degree, so I'll do false, but if I have experience, I'll do true, and I run it, notice we get you can apply. So this also passes. So if you have a degree or you have an experience and you're over 18. So I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, and don't forget to like and subscribe for new future videos.